The story begins in a bustling law firm in the heart of the city. The firm, known for handling high-profile cases, has a reputation for excellence and a diverse team of top-tier lawyers. Among them is Daniel Williams, a highly skilled and respected black lawyer who has won numerous cases and earned the admiration of his colleagues. Despite his impressive track record, Daniel has faced his share of challenges due to the color of his skin. One afternoon, a new client arrives at the firm. Richard Thompson, a wealthy businessman, is seeking legal representation for a complex case that could have significant financial implications. He's heard about the firm's stellar reputation and has high expectations for the legal team that will represent him. As he waits in the firm's lavish conference room, he notices Daniel walking by. When Daniel enters the room to introduce himself as the lawyer assigned to Richard's case, Richard's demeanor immediately changes. He eyes Daniel with thinly veiled suspicion and a hint of disdain. Despite Daniel's warm and professional greeting, Richard remains cold and distant. Without bothering to hide his prejudice, Richard bluntly asks to speak to the senior partner, implying that he would prefer someone else, someone white, to handle his case. Daniel, maintaining his composure, calmly explains that he was personally selected for the case due to his expertise in the specific area of law involved. However, Richard is adamant, refusing to even consider the possibility of Daniel representing him. He makes it clear that he will not work with a black lawyer, leaving Daniel stunned by the blatant racism. After Richard's request is escalated to the senior partner, there's a tense moment of decision. The senior partner, aware of Daniel's abilities and the firm's commitment to diversity, stands by Daniel, refusing to give in to Richard's discriminatory demands. Richard, however, remains resolute, even threatening to take his business elsewhere if his request is not honored. This initial encounter sets the stage for what is to come. Daniel is left with a choice: step back and let the firm potentially lose a lucrative client, or stand his ground and prove his worth, regardless of the color of his skin. Little does Richard know, his decision to refuse Daniel will set off a chain of events that will leave everyone, including himself, utterly shocked. After the confrontation, Daniel Williams returns to his office, his mind racing. He's no stranger to prejudice, but the blatant refusal from Richard Thompson stings more than usual. This case, he knows, is significant, not just for the firm, but for his own career. However, Daniel is not one to back down in the face of discrimination. Later that day, the senior partner, Mr. Anderson, calls Daniel into his office. Mr. Anderson, an older white man who has seen the legal world change over the decades, respects Daniel deeply. He expresses his frustration with Richard's attitude, but leaves the final decision to Daniel. Mr. Anderson makes it clear that, while the firm values its clients, it values its principles even more. Daniel takes a deep breath and makes his decision. He tells Mr. Anderson that he won't allow a client's racism to dictate how he does his job. He's worked too hard to let someone else's ignorance undermine his capabilities. If Richard wants the best legal representation, Daniel is confident he's the right person for the job, whether Richard likes it or not. Mr. Anderson nods, proud of Daniel's resolve. He promises to support Daniel in whatever happens next, and agrees to inform Richard of Daniel's decision to remain on the case. As Daniel leaves the office, he feels a mix of anxiety and determination. He knows he's stepping into a storm, but he's ready to face whatever comes. The next day, Mr. Anderson contacts Richard to inform him that Daniel will remain as his lawyer if he chooses to stay with the firm. Richard is furious, feeling disrespected and disregarded. He threatens to pull his case from the firm, but after a brief silence on the phone, Richard reluctantly agrees to a meeting with Daniel, insisting it will be the last chance before he makes his final decision. Daniel knows that this upcoming meeting could make or break his involvement in the case, but he's prepared to stand his ground. As he prepares for the meeting, Daniel reflects on the countless challenges he's faced and overcome to reach this point in his career. This is just one more hurdle, and he's determined to clear it with the professionalism and expertise that have defined his career so far. The day of the meeting arrives, and the tension is palpable. Daniel prepares meticulously, reviewing every aspect of the case and ensuring he's ready for any challenge Richard might throw his way. He knows that Richard will be looking for any excuse to dismiss him, so he needs to be flawless. As the clock ticks closer to the meeting time, Daniel feels a familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach, but he pushes it aside. He's been here before, facing clients who doubted him for reasons unrelated to his ability. But this time, it feels different, more personal. When Richard arrives at the firm, his demeanor is as cold and dismissive as ever. He barely acknowledges Daniel as he enters the conference room, instead directing his attention to Mr. Anderson, who is also present for the meeting. Richard makes it clear from the start that he's only there because of Mr. Anderson's insistence. The meeting begins with formalities, but it quickly shifts as Richard starts to test Daniel. He questions Daniel's qualifications, his experience, and even his commitment to the case. It's clear that Richard is trying to provoke a reaction, hoping to catch Daniel off guard or make him lose his composure. But Daniel remains calm and professional throughout. He answers each of Richard's questions with precision, backing up his statements with facts and evidence from his successful track record. He doesn't allow Richard's barbs to affect him, maintaining a steady and confident demeanor. As the meeting progresses, something begins to shift. Richard, who entered the room with a chip on his shoulder, starts to see that Daniel is not easily intimidated. Daniel's knowledge of the case and his ability to navigate the legal complexities with ease are undeniable. Richard is forced to confront the fact that his prejudice has blinded him to the reality of Daniel's competence. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere in the room has changed. While Richard doesn't openly admit it, there's a grudging respect in his tone as he agrees to let Daniel continue handling the case. Mr. Anderson watches the exchange with quiet satisfaction, knowing that Daniel has just won a significant battle, not just for himself, but for the firm as a whole. As Richard leaves, Daniel finally allows himself to exhale. The meeting was intense, but he stood his ground and earned a victory on his terms. However, he knows that this is just the beginning. The real challenge lies ahead, in proving that his ability to win the case is as strong as his ability to stand up to bigotry. Following the tense meeting, Daniel dives deeper into the case. He knows that the only way to truly change Richard's perception is through action, not words. Determined to prove his worth, Daniel spends long hours at the firm, meticulously analyzing every piece of evidence, crafting a compelling strategy, and anticipating every possible move the opposing counsel might make. Daniel's dedication does not go unnoticed by his colleagues. Some who were initially indifferent or unsure about him begin to see the depth of his commitment and expertise. His work ethic and attention to detail become evident as he unearths key pieces of evidence that others had overlooked. These discoveries start to turn the tide in their favor, making it increasingly clear that Daniel is not just competent. He's exceptional. As the case progresses, Daniel faces several hurdles, including a particularly challenging deposition where the opposing counsel attempts to undermine his credibility. Despite the aggressive tactics, Daniel remains poised, skillfully countering each attack with well-prepared responses. His performance during the deposition impresses not only his colleagues but also Mr. Anderson, who had been keeping a closer eye on the proceedings. Meanwhile, Richard starts to receive updates on the progress of the case. Each report highlights Daniel's pivotal role in strengthening their position. Though he's still reluctant to admit it, Richard cannot deny that Daniel is making a significant impact. The prejudice he held begins to waver as he realizes that his case might be in the best possible hands after all. Daniel, aware that he's gradually winning over his toughest critic, doesn't allow himself to get complacent. He knows that one misstep could undo all the progress he's made. He continues to push himself, determined to see the case through to a successful conclusion, not just for the client, but for his own sense of justice and self-worth. With each passing day, the tension between Daniel and Richard diminishes, replaced by a growing, albeit reluctant, respect. Daniel's perseverance is slowly dismantling the barriers that prejudice had built. Yet, Daniel remains focused, knowing that the ultimate validation will come only with a victory in the courtroom. As the case moves closer to trial, tensions within the firm begin to rise. Daniel, fully immersed in the case, spends his days and nights preparing for every possible scenario. He knows that this trial is not just about winning for the client, but also about proving his capabilities beyond any doubt. Richard, though still somewhat distant, can't help but notice the transformation taking place within the firm. His initial skepticism about Daniel starts to fade as he observes the respect Daniel has garnered from their colleagues. The senior partners, including Mr. Anderson, openly praise Daniel's dedication and the crucial insights he has brought to the case. One evening, as Daniel is working late in the office, Richard unexpectedly walks into the conference room. The tension is palpable, but this time it feels different. Richard, holding a file in his hand, looks at Daniel with a mixture of reluctance and newfound respect. "I came to go over some final details before the trial," Richard says, his tone softer than before. Daniel nods, inviting him to sit. As they discuss the case, Richard begins to ask Daniel's opinion on certain strategies, genuinely listening to his responses. It's a stark contrast from their earlier interactions, where Richard barely acknowledged Daniel's presence. The turning point comes when Richard acknowledges a crucial piece of evidence that Daniel had found, a piece that could potentially swing the case in their favor. Richard hesitates for a moment, then finally says, "I have to admit, I didn't think you'd find something like this. You've done an exceptional job, Daniel." For the first time, Daniel sees a crack in Richard's hardened exterior. It's a small victory, but a significant one. The acknowledgement isn't just about the case. It's about Richard starting to see Daniel for who he really is, a highly competent lawyer who deserves respect. As they wrap up their discussion, Richard, almost as an afterthought, adds, "You know, I've been wrong before. Maybe I was wrong about you too." Daniel simply nods, not wanting to break the moment with words. He knows that this is just the beginning of a new chapter, one where his abilities are no longer in question, and where he is judged by the quality of his work rather than the color of his skin. The trial is just around the corner, and for the first time, Daniel feels that he has the full support of his team, including Richard. The stakes are high, but Daniel is more determined than ever to deliver a victory, not just for the client, but for everyone who ever doubted him. The day of the trial arrives, and the courtroom buzzes with anticipation. The case has garnered significant attention due to its high stakes and the prominence of the law firm involved. Daniel, now fully in the spotlight, walks into the courtroom with a calm confidence that contrasts sharply with the nerves he felt just weeks before. As the trial unfolds, Daniel's meticulous preparation begins to shine. He presents the evidence with clarity and precision, making a compelling case for their client. The opposing counsel, seasoned and sharp, tries to rattle Daniel with tough cross-examinations, but Daniel remains unflappable, responding with poise and confidence. His ability to think on his feet and counter every argument with solid facts earns him the admiration of the courtroom, including some skeptical onlookers who had initially doubted his capabilities. Richard, seated next to Daniel at the counsel's table, watches with a mix of pride and amazement. He had expected Daniel to perform well, but the sheer level of professionalism and expertise Daniel displays exceeds all expectations. It's clear that Daniel is not just a competent lawyer. He is exceptional. Throughout the trial, Daniel and Richard begin to work seamlessly as a team. Richard, who was once hesitant to even acknowledge Daniel's ideas, now actively consults him during breaks, valuing his input on strategy and next steps. It's a partnership that neither of them saw coming, but one that has become increasingly effective as the trial progresses. The turning point in the trial comes when Daniel cross-examines a key witness for the opposing side. With a combination of careful questioning and strategic presentation of evidence, Daniel manages to expose inconsistencies in the witness's testimony. It's a masterful performance that leaves the courtroom in stunned silence, followed by a ripple of murmurs as everyone realizes the impact of what just happened. The judge, visibly impressed, calls for a recess, giving Daniel and Richard a moment to regroup. As they step out of the courtroom, Richard turns to Daniel with a smile, a genuine one, free of the skepticism and condescension that once marked their interactions. "You were brilliant in there," Richard admits, his voice filled with newfound respect. "I don't think anyone saw that coming, least of all the opposing counsel." Daniel smiles back, grateful for the acknowledgement. "We're not done yet," he replies, his focus still on the goal ahead. "But I think we're in a good place." As they return to the courtroom, Daniel feels a surge of confidence. The trial isn't over, but for the first time, he feels like he truly belongs, not just in that courtroom, but in the world of law, where skill and dedication are what truly matter. As the trial nears its conclusion, the tension in the courtroom becomes palpable. Both sides have presented their cases, and now it is time for the final arguments. The outcome hinges on how well these arguments are made, and all eyes are on Daniel and Richard. Richard, who has taken the lead for most of the trial, steps forward first. His argument is strong, articulate, and filled with the legal acumen that has made him one of the top lawyers in the city. He emphasizes the facts, dismantling the opposing counsel's case point by point. It's a performance that leaves no doubt about his expertise, and it's clear that the judge is taking note. When Richard finishes, there's a brief pause in the courtroom as everyone waits for Daniel. It's the moment of truth. Daniel takes a deep breath, then stands and walks to the center of the room. He can feel the weight of the moment, but instead of being intimidated, he feels a calm resolve. Daniel begins his argument, not by diving straight into the legalities, but by addressing the jury in a personal and heartfelt manner. He speaks not just about the facts, but about the principles of justice, fairness, and integrity. His words resonate deeply, and the jury leans in, hanging on every word. He then skillfully weaves the evidence into his narrative, showing how each piece supports their case. He points out the flaws in the opposing argument, but does so in a way that is respectful and grounded in logic. Daniel's delivery is passionate yet controlled, and it's clear that he is speaking not just as a lawyer, but as someone who genuinely believes in the cause. As he concludes, Daniel makes a powerful appeal to the jury's sense of justice. He reminds them of their duty, not just to the letter of the law, but to the spirit of what is right. There's a moment of silence as he finishes, the weight of his words lingering in the air. When Daniel returns to his seat, the atmosphere in the courtroom is electric. Even the opposing counsel, who had been dismissive of Daniel at the start, looks unsettled. Richard glances at Daniel with a nod of approval, clearly impressed. The judge gives final instructions to the jury, and they retire to deliberate. As the jury leaves the room, Daniel and Richard exchange a look. No words are needed to express the mutual respect that has been earned through the course of the trial. Now, all they can do is wait. The wait for the jury's decision is excruciating. Minutes feel like hours as Daniel, Richard, and the entire courtroom sit in tense anticipation. The weight of the trial and its potential implications press down on everyone present. Daniel tries to stay calm, but his mind races with possibilities. He glances at Richard, who, despite his composed exterior, is clearly feeling the pressure too. This case has become more than just another day in court. It's a battle for justice, and Daniel's performance in the final argument has raised the stakes even higher. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, the jury begins to file back into the courtroom. The room falls silent as everyone's attention focuses on the foreperson, who holds the verdict in their hands. The judge asks the jury if they have reached a decision. The foreperson nods and hands a piece of paper to the bailiff, who then passes it to the judge. The judge reads the verdict silently first, his expression giving nothing away. Then, in a calm voice, he announces the jury's decision. As the verdict is read aloud, the tension breaks. The jury has found in favor of Daniel's client. The words hang in the air, met with a mixture of emotions: relief, joy, and disbelief. Daniel feels a wave of exhilaration and pride wash over him. This victory isn't just about winning a case. It's about standing up for what's right and proving that even in the face of adversity, justice can prevail. The opposing side is visibly disappointed, but there's an air of respect that wasn't there before. Richard, who had been doubtful of Daniel initially, turns to him with a genuine smile. "Well done, Daniel," he says, extending his hand. "You've more than earned your place here." Daniel shakes Richard's hand, grateful for the acknowledgement. He looks around the courtroom, taking in the moment. The judge, the jury, the audience, everyone is watching him. But instead of feeling pressure, he feels a deep sense of accomplishment. He has shown them all what he is capable of. As the courtroom begins to empty, Daniel's client approaches him, tears of gratitude in their eyes. "Thank you," they say, their voice choked with emotion. "You saved my life." Daniel smiles warmly, humbled by their words. "It was an honor to fight for you," he replies. As they leave the courtroom together, Daniel feels a new sense of purpose. This victory has shown him that he's not just a lawyer. He's a defender of justice. And with that realization comes the understanding that this is only the beginning. After the trial, Daniel's victory becomes the talk of the legal community. News of the case spreads quickly, and soon, everyone in the firm is buzzing about the young lawyer who stood up to a senior partner and won a challenging case. The case that was once seen as a lost cause has now become a symbol of resilience and determination. Daniel's confidence grows as he receives praise from his colleagues. Associates who barely noticed him before now stop him in the halls to congratulate him, and even some partners offer nods of respect. It's clear that he has earned a new level of recognition within the firm, and his future prospects seem brighter than ever. Richard, true to his word, becomes a mentor to Daniel. He invites Daniel to lunch and discusses career strategies, offering advice on how to navigate the complex world of corporate law. Despite their rocky start, the two develop a mutual respect, and Daniel finds himself learning valuable lessons from the experienced lawyer. However, the victory also brings new challenges. With success comes higher expectations, and Daniel is quickly assigned to more demanding cases. The pressure mounts as he juggles multiple responsibilities, but he's determined to prove that his win wasn't a fluke. He spends long hours at the office, poring over legal documents, strategizing, and preparing for his next courtroom battle. Outside of work, Daniel's life begins to change as well. Friends and family, who once worried about his choice to pursue law, now express pride in his accomplishments. His parents, who had always supported him, beam with pride when they hear about his victory. Daniel feels a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that he's making a difference. But not everyone is pleased with Daniel's success. Some of the more traditional members of the firm, who had sided with Richard in the beginning, feel threatened by Daniel's rise. They start to question his methods, hinting that he was lucky rather than skilled. Daniel hears whispers of jealousy and resentment, but he refuses to let it deter him. As he navigates the complexities of his newfound success, Daniel realizes that his journey is far from over. He has proven that he can stand up to challenges, but now he must maintain his momentum and continue to excel. The road ahead is still full of obstacles, but Daniel is ready to face them head-on. As Daniel's reputation grows, he starts attracting more clients who admire his tenacity and skill. One day, he receives an unexpected call from a high-profile client who was initially represented by another partner in the firm. This client, Mr. Williams, is an influential businessman known for his success and for being extremely selective about who he works with. Intrigued by the opportunity, Daniel agrees to meet with Mr. Williams. When they meet, Daniel is surprised to find that Mr. Williams is not the typical client he's used to. He's straightforward, demanding, and has a reputation for being difficult. However, he's also someone who respects results, and Daniel's recent courtroom victory has clearly impressed him. During their meeting, Mr. Williams makes it clear that he chose Daniel for a reason. He admires Daniel's willingness to stand up against the odds and sees in him the same determination that he values in himself. Mr. Williams reveals that he's facing a complicated legal battle involving a major merger, and he needs someone who can handle the pressure and think creatively. Despite the daunting nature of the case, Daniel is eager to take on the challenge. He knows that this is a significant opportunity to prove himself once again, and he's determined to make the most of it. However, as he begins to dig into the details of the case, he realizes that it's more complex than he initially thought. The stakes are higher, and the opposition is fierce. As Daniel dives deeper into the case, he starts working closely with Mr. Williams. The two develop an unlikely alliance, with Mr. Williams offering insights and strategies from his business experience, and Daniel applying his legal expertise to navigate the intricacies of the case. Despite their differences in age and background, they find common ground in their shared goal of winning. Meanwhile, back at the firm, Daniel's colleagues are watching closely. Some are supportive, seeing this as another chance for Daniel to shine, while others are skeptical, doubting whether he can handle such a high-profile case. Richard, who has become a mentor to Daniel, offers guidance and support, but also warns him about the potential pitfalls of taking on such a demanding client. As the case progresses, Daniel finds himself facing new challenges, both in and out of the courtroom. He must balance the demands of the case with the expectations of the firm, all while managing the pressures that come with working for a client as formidable as Mr. Williams. The road ahead is uncertain, but Daniel is more determined than ever to succeed. With the support of Mr. Williams and his growing confidence, Daniel prepares meticulously for the upcoming courtroom battle. The case is one of the most complex he has ever encountered, involving intricate corporate law, aggressive opposition, and media scrutiny. It becomes clear that this trial will not only test his legal knowledge, but also his ability to stay composed under immense pressure. As the trial begins, the courtroom is filled with reporters, legal experts, and curious onlookers. The opposition's legal team is formidable, led by one of the top attorneys in the country, known for his cutthroat tactics. Daniel knows he's up against a seasoned adversary, but he remains focused on the task at hand. The opening statements set the tone for the trial. Daniel's opponent presents a strong case, laying out the complexities of the merger and painting a picture that seems difficult to refute. When it's Daniel's turn, he calmly and clearly presents his arguments, focusing on the legal precedents and the ethical implications of the case. His confidence and clarity start to shift the perception of the courtroom in his favor. Throughout the trial, Daniel faces relentless cross-examinations and unexpected twists. The opposing counsel tries to undermine him, questioning his experience and attempting to rattle his composure. However, Daniel's preparation pays off. He counters each argument with precision, turning potential weaknesses into strengths. At one point, a key witness for the opposition begins to falter under Daniel's questioning, revealing inconsistencies in their testimony. This moment is pivotal, as it starts to unravel the opposing side's narrative. The judge, who had initially seemed skeptical, begins to take notice of Daniel's skill and the cracks in the opposition's case. Outside the courtroom, the media coverage is intense. Daniel's name starts appearing in headlines, and people begin to take notice of the young lawyer who's challenging one of the most powerful legal teams in the country. The pressure mounts, but Daniel remains focused, knowing that the outcome of this case could define his career. As the trial progresses, Daniel's relationship with Mr. Williams deepens. The businessman, initially distant and demanding, begins to show a level of respect and trust in Daniel that surprises both of them. They strategize together, with Mr. Williams providing key insights that help Daniel anticipate the opposition's moves. The final days of the trial are the most intense. Both sides present their closing arguments, and the tension in the courtroom is palpable. Daniel delivers a powerful closing statement, appealing not just to the legal facts, but to the principles of justice and fairness. His words resonate with the jury, and as he finishes, there's a moment of silence before the judge calls a recess. As the jury deliberates, Daniel and Mr. Williams wait anxiously. The entire firm is on edge, knowing that the outcome of this case could have far-reaching implications. For Daniel, it's not just about winning. It's about proving to himself and everyone else that he belongs in this world, that his skills and integrity can stand up to any challenge. The moment of truth arrives when the jury returns with their verdict. The courtroom falls silent as the foreman stands to deliver the decision that will either validate all of Daniel's hard work or send him back to square one. The courtroom is silent as the jury foreman stands, holding the piece of paper that will decide the case. Daniel feels his heart pounding in his chest, his mind racing with the weight of the moment. He glances at Mr. Williams, who gives him a nod of reassurance, but the tension is overwhelming. The judge asks the jury foreman to read the verdict. The foreman clears his throat, and in that split second, the entire room seems to hold its breath. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff. A wave of relief washes over Daniel as the words sink in. The victory is his. The case that seemed insurmountable, the trial that had pushed him to his limits, has ended in success. For a moment, he can hardly believe it, the reality of the win slowly dawning on him. The courtroom erupts in murmurs as the media begins to report the outcome. Mr. Williams turns to Daniel, a rare smile on his face. "Well done," he says simply, but the words carry a weight of respect and gratitude that Daniel hadn't expected. The opposing counsel, who had been so confident, now looks defeated, offering Daniel a curt nod before packing up their things. As Daniel steps out of the courtroom, he's met by a barrage of reporters, all eager to get a comment from the young lawyer who just won a high-profile case. He answers a few questions, but his mind is elsewhere. He's thinking about what this victory means, not just for his career, but for what it symbolizes. The news spreads quickly. The legal community takes notice, and soon, Daniel's name is being mentioned in circles he never thought he'd be part of. Invitations for interviews, speaking engagements, and even offers from other firms start pouring in. But for Daniel, the most significant moment comes when he returns to his firm. The partners who once doubted him now look at him with newfound respect. They see him not just as a promising young lawyer, but as someone who has proven his worth in the most challenging circumstances. The firm decides to promote him, recognizing his talent and the potential he brings. But the most important moment for Daniel comes when he sees his family. His parents, who had always believed in him, embrace him with pride. They've followed the case closely, and their joy in his success is evident. Daniel realizes that this victory is not just his. It's a testament to the support and love he's received from those who've stood by him. The case becomes a defining moment in Daniel's career, but it's also a turning point for his life. He understands now that his journey is far from over, but with each challenge, he's growing stronger, more confident, and more determined to make his mark on the world. And as for the racist client who had refused to work with Daniel, the man's reputation suffers a significant blow, and he eventually loses his position in the company due to the backlash. He's forced to confront his own prejudices, though whether he truly changes is a story for another time. In the end, Daniel's victory is about more than just winning a case. It's about standing up against injustice, proving his worth, and showing that no one can define him by the color of his skin. He's shown the world what he's capable of, and he's just getting started.